for me, it's just always been, I've had kind of this inner resilience, if you will, of I'm not going to let anybody else hold me down. Like this may have happened to me, but it's in my control what I do with it from here. And, I'm going to get back up and dust myself off.
Welcome to the Sidehustle Lounge. If you're looking for flexible ways to earn income, grow your mindset, and live the lifestyle you've always dreamed of, you're in the right place. So lower the lights, grab your favorite beverage, and join your host, founder of NotaryCoach.com and Amazon best-selling author of Sign and Thrive, How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent, Bill Soroka.
Cheers, and welcome to my next guest, Dr. Erica Adkins. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I read your book, Rock Bottom is Where Bad Bitches Are Built. I saw the title and I absolutely knew I had to read that book. I love a good, inspiring story, and yours certainly did that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for writing it. Today we're going to talk about coping with trauma and heartbreak as a solopreneur, because as everyone listening knows, when you're a solopreneur or just starting out or an independent contractor, your volume, your production is based solely on you. And while that's true, life still continues to happen to us.
Correct.
We lose loved ones, we break up with people, we divorce, we lose pets, we got all of this other things, all this other stuff that continues to happen, and yet we still have to work towards our dreams. Your book really jumped out at me for a number of different reasons. You got really vulnerable in sharing your story there.
I did.
Can you let's start there, and how did the idea behind the book come out? And then also, how did you decide to be that vulnerable, sending it out into the world?
So the idea for the book came about. The book sort of starts setting the scene in 2013. I was pregnant with my youngest child, who's about to turn 8. And, I was working in a prison at the time, married, and so on and so forth. And I had always wanted to write a book. My whole entire life, I wanted to write a book. I wasn't sure about what. And then, the sort of precipitating event, if you will, was at 4.5 months pregnant, finding out that my husband had a child with another woman and had this kind of two different families, basically. And so as I was moving through that situation and that pain and that the anger and the hurt and the anxiety and all of the feelings, I knew that, okay, well, here comes some of the content for my future book. And it sucks that I'm living it right now, but this is a story that you don't hear very often, or maybe you do, and we just don't talk about it. But so that's where the seed was initially planted. And little did I know that my ex-husband would give me quite a lot of other, content for the book years after that. And so it just sort of, for about a period of 3 years, I was just surviving. We ultimately divorced in 2016. I didn't start writing the book until I was on deployment. So I am a clinical psychologist. I have a private practice, but I'm an Army Reserve psychologist also. So I was deployed to the Middle East and had shared with a group of other soldiers that I had this desire to write a book, and they were very encouraging. And so this was fall-ish of 2019. So I started a blog at that point, and then just kind of told the story one blog entry at a time. And then about a year, not quite a year ago, last fall, so almost a year after starting the blog, I finally sat down and put it all together. And, the way the book took shape sort of came about as I was writing it, because it was just a bunch of short stories, if you will. And then when I'm doing work with my own clients, I often talk about how healing from trauma is like climbing a mountain or like rock climbing. And I'm sort of the trail guide, if you will. I've been there, done that. I've been up and down the mountain a million times. I know, the different seasons and different barriers we might encounter. I can help you prepare for the climb, etc. But I can't do the hard work for you. I can't climb the mountain for you. I can be there with you. I can support you. I can even kind of throw you on my back and carry you across a stream or something. But ultimately, I've got to put you back down. And so that's often how I set the scene for trauma treatment when I'm working with a client. And so, the idea for the book came to me of, okay, well, let me take this metaphor of healing from trauma is like, like a journey, like climbing a mountain, and, break it down into more sort of workable steps of where you get started. And so that's where the idea of the footholds came from. So at the end of each chapter, I offer, a handful of tips or suggestions of what worked for me and what I also know has worked for other clients. And so it was a process. Yeah, it was a process.
Yeah. I can tell you put a lot into that. And I particularly really enjoyed the footholds because when I got into your book, there was a part of me, especially because you include your journal entries as you were going through those moments. And at some point, I remember thinking at one point, I was like, I can't believe she's sharing this. And then I was thinking, I am so glad she's sharing this. And you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when you were talking. You said, maybe people do go through this or people know other people go through this. But with your story in particular, I think you went deeper in actually sharing something that was so personal and so vulnerable. We just assume that everybody's going through these situations or feeling very similar to what we're feeling, but you gave it a different take on it. And in those footholds at the end was like, oh my gosh, here she is being raw, talking about what you're actually feeling. And I particularly related to that because I have dated narcissistic serial cheaters sometimes, and I fell into that too. So I felt a physical emotion as we were going through, or as I was reading that book. And those footholds gave super practical advice on how to overcome that. How did you feel after publishing such a vulnerable piece of work?
Wow, that is a great question. And it was terrifying. And it's interesting people's responses because it's either people are like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing. You were very vulnerable. I could relate to it, or I know someone that could relate to it. Or they're the opposite, which is what the heck were you thinking? Why would you put yourself out there so much? And for me, honestly, the book was, the journey of writing was more for me than it was for anyone else. I needed to get that story out of my head and onto paper so that I could move forward. I needed to be able to kind of metaphorically and figuratively close that chapter in my life and move forward. And so the idea for the journal, including my journal entries, came to me when the book had been, the content of the book had been written already. And then I thought, you know what? I'm a journaling, that's what I do. That's how I cope. That's how I process things. And I thought, let me go back and reread my entries during that time period and see if there's any content there that might sort of help the book, and in the sense that really giving a good glimpse, of what I was going through and what I was dealing with. And it was hard to read. It was hard to go back and read those entries because, man, I remember what the pain felt like when I was writing them the first time. And so, as far as making myself vulnerable, I feel like trauma, and whether it's, infidelity, domestic violence, combat, sexual assault, just any kind of trauma, it's still kind of taboo in many ways in our culture and in our society. And sometimes you have to get uncomfortable and have uncomfortable conversations in order to normalize something and in order to empower other people to share their stories as well. Is writing a book with your deepest, darkest secrets in it, is that for everyone? Absolutely not. But being able to tell one person or two people or, a trusted friend or family member or therapist, even some of the things that you've struggled with, it's incredibly liberating. And so that was my hope, is that, okay, I'll make myself vulnerable in the hopes that it will help someone else have the courage to step forward and get the help that they need to get out of a situation like I was in.
What a powerful reason to write a book and publish a book that way. And I think you really described that so well. When I think about when I was reading your book and what I was experiencing, I was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with what was being shared and how vulnerable it was. I'm like, because most people don't share that level of detail. And I was like, where is this going? Why is it being shared like this? And then it's like peeling away the layers of like, hey, and then your journal entries, it was like, that could have been my journal, right? Like, I'm relating to that so well. So I'm really grateful that you did that. And I think that's kind of the sign of a powerful book, is when it forces you to think differently and maybe even peel back layers. So again, thank you for writing that. And that brings me kind of to my next point too, is, and you touched on this a bit, but why do you think sharing a story, whether it's yours or maybe somebody else who's kind of going through things, is so important?
There's so much power in story and in storytelling. If you think about it, historically, that's how our history has been passed along, right? Back before writing was a thing, it was verbally telling stories that carried on throughout time. And stories are, there's morals to stories, there's meaning in stories, and stories also can be interpreted different ways depending on who's reading it. And so I think that there's a lot of power in story, because like in my case, again, it was just very liberating. It unlocked a whole different layer of healing for me. And I think many times in telling your story and in telling your story confidently, it can help take away some of the shame that's attached with some of these, like in the case in my books, shame attached with infidelity, shame attached with all of the stuff that I put up with for an extended period of time. Yeah. And unlocking some of that shame and letting that go. I think that's an important piece in sharing stories, is being able to have others validate your experience. Not that you need other people to validate your experience, but certainly it does help you to feel like, okay, what I went through was hard and it was, hurtful, and my feelings are valid in this.
And you're not alone.
Absolutely.
You're not this silo off having this weird experience that other people have never had before. What do you think about the quote? It's one of my favorites. Share your scars, not your wounds. Do you think that processing sharing strategically is important in your story?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point, because sometimes, sharing all of the nitty-gritty details of your story can do more harm than good, in the sense that it can be triggering for others. And I know my story kind of borders on that. There's a lot of detail, but honestly, there's a lot of detail that got left out as well. But I think that, and when it's a wound, it's fresh and you're still healing from it. A scar implies we're a little bit out from the event, from the incident, from whatever it is. And there's been some healing that has occurred. And so sharing the journey of healing and of the healing process, is powerful and important.
As you were going through everything that you went through, you still managed to hang on to your overall bigger dreams, even though you were working, in a prison and with the military at the time. You still wanted to start your own private practice, and you were able to move forward on that. How did that work?
Yeah. So, I feel like working in the prison, at one point that was my my dream, if that sounds weird. um, but I had this grand vision of, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to save the world. I'm going to help people rehabilitate so that when they go home, they can be productive members of society. Unfortunately, the position that I worked within the prison didn't allow me that freedom, and I was utilized in a different way, which was fine. But I got burnt out from doing that, combined with my personal situation. I knew that it was time to go out on my own. And my private practice started as a side hustle. I stayed full time with the Bureau of Prisons for 6 to 8 months while I was getting my private practice up and running. So for a good while, it was just part time. 1 or 2 clients a week until I got myself to the point where, I wanted to do it full time. But it was a huge leap and a huge risk because I had always had the steady, dependable paycheck, and to go from that to I am 100% responsible for, my family's well-being based upon my ability to run this business. Because yes, my skill set is in treating clients, but it's a business. And so there's all of that aspect to it as well. It was definitely challenging. And then, later on in the book, talking about some of the later traumas with my ex-husband, I was in full-time private practice. And so trying to navigate, a lot of those traumas and difficulties, and not being able to, I shouldn't say not being able to, I could have missed work. But you don't get sick leave and you don't get paid if you're not working when you're a, single entrepreneur. And so I made the decision that I'm not going to let this affect me to the level where it impairs my work. I'm going to, in my mind, draw these firm boundaries between this is my work life and this is my home life. And was it always easy to do that? Absolutely not. There were times when I would find myself just sort of feeling like, oh gosh, this takes a lot of effort today. And I just told myself, that's okay. It's okay that today takes effort. Tomorrow's a new day. The day after that's a new day. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And fortunately for me, I'm in a line of work that I find to be incredibly meaningful. I love my work. I love what I do. I love the people that I get to help on a daily basis. And so I think having work that's meaningful to me also helped me through those tough times, because yes, I was going through my own struggles, but I could see that there were other people hurting as well, and that I was able to help them.
I bet that is so helpful to pull you through, or having a compelling why, some major purpose or reason that your business has to work will pull you through some of these hard times. Do you have like a specific strategy you used to help you put one foot in front of the other when your heartbreak or was at its worst? Mm-hmm. Like, for those listening who might be going through something similar, whether it's grief of any kind or heartache, what could they do to help move through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that I don't remember who said it or where I heard it, but somewhere along the line, you have a 100% success rate of making it through tough days. If you didn't, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. Right. And so that in the, the biblical saying of this too shall pass, which I know can be kind of cliche sometimes and can feel kind of, like somebody is minimizing your difficulty of just like, oh, well, this will be fine eventually. But for me, that idea that, okay, this minute that I'm in right now is very difficult, but the next minute might be easier, or maybe it's more difficult, but guess what? I'm going to make it through. Time, the one thing that we can all count on is that time is going to keep on ticking. And so I just told myself that just keep putting one foot in front of the other. You will eventually figure this out. Eventually, some sort of answer is going to come to you and you'll feel peace. You'll feel resolution. And until then, you don't have the option to sit and do nothing. I have 3 children, and that they are my why. They have always been my why. They will always be my why. But they didn't have the option of somebody else stepping in and caring for them. So it was, Erica, like, put your big girl panties on and just deal with this. And it's going to be hard and it's going to suck and you're going to get through it. And so it was a lot of sort of cheerleading, my own self along the way. Sometimes I had to remind myself just to breathe, that I would find myself literally holding my breath at times. And, just our breath is so important. The inhale can energize us, and the exhale helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And so when as simple as that sounds, like just focusing on our breath can help center us back in this moment. So I did a lot of breathing and centering myself. Yeah.
It is incredible, and I know it gets a little cliche too, but breathing is probably one of the secrets to my peace of mind as well. It just, by the time I start breathing, I always say I'm going to do 10 deep breaths. And by the time that I get to 6 or 7, I've already forgotten whatever it was that I needed to breathe about.
Yes.
Super, super
Very
powerful. And I know the way my brain works, I always like to prepare. I've got a backup plan for a backup plan. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to prepare or build resilience for trauma yet to come?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I don't know if I've ever thought of it conceptualized that way. But I think that the more that we can really focus on the moment that we're in and being present and mindful, that is almost kind of like basic training for life, if you will. Because if we spend our lives looking in the rearview mirror, that's where a lot of times depression can come from, or it certainly doesn't help depression if we're looking back on, either past failures or past losses or past anything, or if we're looking too far in the future and worrying about things yet to come, we're missing out on the present moment. And so, unfortunately, I talk about this in the book, that there's no way really to insulate ourselves completely from hard things, because life is hard, and hard things, bad things sometimes often happen to us with little or no control. But just being able to kind of breathe and center yourself in the present moment, and reminders of, okay, what do I know to be true in this moment? And, what are the things that are important to me, and are they still intact? And let me focus on those things. And so, I think just that ability to be present and be mindful can make a difference, when you're going through something difficult, because again, even if the best you can do is take a deep breath and take a step forward, then that's the best you can do. And that's enough.
And that's enough. I'm picking up a pretty big Eckhart Tolle vibe here. Are you familiar?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I love Eckhart Tolle, and I love, there are many great philosophers and yogis and psychologists, etc., who have adopted the idea of mindfulness and being present in the moment. And I would say Eckhart Tolle was kind of my introduction to a lot of that.
Likewise, me too. Power of Now was probably one of the most powerful books I've ever read. I try to read it once a year just to stay refreshed on it. Mm-hmm. Speaking of mentors and gurus and teachers, do you have suggestions for those who might be looking, or do they think they might need some assistance?
I have a few go-tos. My number one, I would say, is Dr. Brene Brown. She wrote, Daring Greatly. And I thought it was just me and The Gifts of Imperfection, and several others since then. But she's a shame researcher. And so she is sort of the queen of I don't want to say the queen of shame, because that sounds terrible, but the queen expert of shame and dealing with shame. She's amazing. And I've read all of her works and continue to read her works, and she's probably my number one. And then there's another a researcher named Dr. Kristen Neff, who does a lot of work in self-compassion. And again, that's one of those things that seems pretty simple, but is very, very difficult, because if we pay attention to the way we talk to ourselves, it's often very different than how we would ever speak to a loved one. Our expectations for ourselves are higher. We're harder on ourselves, more critical. And Dr. Kristen Neff does the research on self-compassion, which is just that idea of, being more gracious with yourself. And she and Brene have very similar works and often cite each other.
I love that. Well, I'm going to take a look into Dr. Kristen Neff because I think for me, the voice that we have in our head, that's the most important voice. We hear it the most throughout our life, and it molds our feelings, then it molds our behavior. And so I think it's critical. And my inner critic can be a real bitch sometimes, and it just tears me apart at times. So I love that you've focused on that. And Brene Brown, I just feel like we're besties after I've read her book, and she really did. She got me through some of those heartache moments through Daring Greatly. I love that. Now, how do people know? Because your book is called Rock Bottom is Where Bad Bitches Are Built. So how do you know if you're at rock bottom?
Excellent question. And I think it's different for all of us. And you may hit rock bottom several different times. It's before you've actually, and I don't know what the actual rock bottom is for anyone. I thought I had reached it when going through all the different things in the book. And then since then, something else has happened. And it's like, well, I wrote about this and I said that this is probably not going to be the last rock bottom. And here we are. And so it's just, I think for me, rock bottom is getting to a place in your life where you feel like your resources or your coping skills are pretty much tapped out and you feel almost desperate, like I don't know where to go from here. And feeling like there's only up, like how much worse can it possibly get? And so rock bottom is going to look different to every person, just like experiencing a trauma. We could put 10 of us in a room together and we all experience someone bursting in with a gun, and 10 of us may have 10 different things that we remember about the event, 10 different things that bother us about the event, and 10 different ways of coping or struggling after the event. And so rock bottom is different for everybody. And, for me, it's just always been, I've had kind of this inner, I don't know, resilience, if you will, of I'm not going to let anybody else hold me down. Like this may have happened to me, but it's in my control what I do with it from here. And, I'm going to get back up and dust myself off. So, I would encourage anyone if you feel like you're at rock bottom, then that's your rock bottom. And you may not have had the choice of what happened to you, but you have the choice of how you respond to it. And you have the choice of what comes next for you.
So if somebody just makes that decision, I'm at rock bottom, my resources are tapped, I'm not sure where to go, who do they call for help?
Great question. It may be different for everyone, but for me, I'm very fortunate to have a great support system of friends and family, and they definitely helped out. In fact, that's where the title of my book came from. I reached out to a best friend during all of that and said, Tony, I just don't know how much more of this I can take. And she said, Erica, rock bottom is where bad bitches are built. Now you get up and you do what you have to do. And okay, I hear you. And so, trusted friend, trusted family member. And sometimes people that doesn't feel safe. You might not have that support network. There's crisis hotlines. There are therapists. With COVID, I think one of the silver linings is that telehealth has become something that I think is here to stay, which has made mental health care more accessible to people in more remote areas or who may have, difficulties accessing that. So, a religious or spiritual leader, if that's something that's important to you, a therapist, there's always someone that you can reach out to, even if you don't feel like there is.
I love that. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're interested in learning more about Dr. Erica Adkins, she's a licensed psychologist, a business owner, fellow business owner. She's obviously a published author, wife, mother, soldier, and ice cream enthusiast. So you are my people. Yeah, absolutely. You can visit www.sidehustlelounge.com and join the free VIP room. I'll have all the resources and links to the workbook for Rock Bottom is Where Bad Bitches Are Built, and plus links to Erica's book. Thanks again, Erica. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.